Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to you all and thank you for sharing your time with us today. My name is Sachin, and together with my colleagues Subodh and Johnson, we will take you through our session today about 12 tips for rapid mobile application development. To introduce the panel, I have Subodh, Deputy General Manager, and Johnson, who is the technical lead. We are really excited about this webinar and hope you are too. Harbinger Systems is part of Harbinger Group, which is a leading global provider of innovative software products and services to companies in over 57 countries. Harbinger Systems has for the last 20 years been a leading provider of software engineering services to some of the world's best product companies, including high-tech startups in Silicon Valley. The mobile practice at Harbinger Systems is entrusted by startups, enterprise ISV, and leading NYSE NASDAQ-listed enterprises to design and develop mobile applications across iPhone, iPad, Windows 7, Android, and BlackBerry. While coming back to our session today and a panel, Subodh he's the DGM, and he leads a team of project managers who also overlook mobile application development for the above listed clients. Johnson is the technical lead and is also leading the mobile incubator team at Harbinger Systems. In fact, he's a go-to guy for mobile development. So, and just a small disclaimer that we have received requests to have attendees on mute so as to allow any conversations or background activities to be kept private. Please do make use of the question panel in the lower right of your GoToWebinar window. This is the way to communicate with us during the webinar. We will be keeping an eye on the question box as we move through the material and keeping track of your questions, and will cover them in a Q&A open forum at the conclusion of the session. Please do share any and all questions with us. Also, we will be gathering up all your questions and preparing a QA document that we will share with you as a reference from this session. So if your question isn't covered or completely answered today, please do know that a response is coming. The webinar will be recorded for you to share with your colleagues later or for your own review. Again, on behalf of Subodh, myself, and the whole team, welcome to our webinar. And before I pass on the control to Subodh, I would appreciate if you could cooperate and let us know in the question box if you can hear us, so that Subodh can then start with his presentation. Okay, thanks for your cooperation. Subodh, yours.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Subodh, and as Sachin introduced, I'm working as a Deputy General Manager for Technology Solutions at Harbinger Systems. Me, along with my team, we have put together a presentation which covers 12 tips which any developer can use for rapidly building native mobile applications. Before we start off, I just want to make a quick check that all of you are able to see the presentation that I have shared on GoToWebinar. Can you please use your chat window or question box to respond? Great. Thank you so much for that. So again, just for everyone's reference, here are pictures of myself, Subodh, and Sachin. And let's quickly move and get started with the actual presentation. So all of us understand the importance of mobile applications, especially native applications. Any product or any service nowadays is incomplete if it doesn't have a mobile interface. May it be an enterprise application or may it be a social networking app. A mobile interface is a must because it enhances user experience, it increases the application's reach to users, and it's just kind of a trend these days. Now, since we understand that mobile apps are becoming really key, one of the important factors for any application is the time that it takes to reach the market. what we have understood over the years of our experience is that any developer needs the application to reach market quickly because either he wants to be the first of its kind, that is, no one else from his competitive spectrum has an application out there and he just wants to be the first of them, or they just want to get ahead of competition so that competition has a hurdle to now cross with the help of this mobile application, or they want to catch up with the leaders. So assuming that you're a startup company and the leaders are already established, but if the leaders don't have any mobile apps of their own, your service can surge or be competitive with them with the help of a mobile application because it's going to find more user acceptance. And finally, a mobile app is basically built quickly so that it can grab a seasonal demand. For instance, an app which is a fun activity app for Thanksgiving or maybe Halloween, or even when fuel prices go up in summer, there are applications which spring out which talk about the cheapest gas that you can get in your locality. So all these are seasonal applications where the application is very short-lived, but it just suits the purpose of that duration. So in order to set perspective of this webinar, we have plotted a native mobile application life cycle. As you can see, the life cycle is very much similar to web or desktop-based applications. But what is crucial over here is that the life cycle duration is extremely short as compared to its counterparts. The life cycle begins with an ideation phase, then it moves into conceptualization, where the concept is formulated in some form of mock-ups or wireframes. Then the actual coding begins, where you have developers working on it. Then it goes into the testing cycles where QA and user acceptance testing happens. Then you submit your application to different publishers like the app stores. And then finally you distribute the applications through a variety of media where majorly the publishers help you with that. What we anticipate is that all this should take around 45 to 60 days for a core application and 15 to 20 days for rolling out patches or updates. We have made an assumption that we are looking at a medium complexity application which has a server side and a bunch of screens and graphs or images on it. However, market research indicates that 45 to 60 days is not the reality. The reality is much more critical. Market research says that in reality, the application would take nearly 70 to 80 days to build just the core part of it, and another 25 to 40 days to build updates or to release patches. Now, if you relate this with the time to market judgment that we placed on the previous slide, 70 to 80 days is really going against the flow. So what should we do now? Here's another example of how this affects on the cost. Mobile Cost Media has recently published some costings for mobile applications. Simple apps cost around $4,000 to $10,000 to build them. Moderate apps, which is probably, I think the example that they gave was Barack Obama's election campaign application. That was a moderate app, and it takes almost $50,000 to $150,000 to build that. And complex applications like CRMs or the applications that integrate into enterprise systems take $150,000 or even more. Now, these are some huge numbers considering the fact that mobile applications are key enablers to some of the core systems that we have. So coming to the core part of this webinar, we will try to understand how can we optimize the product timeline so that we can achieve the target of completing an app in maybe 45 to 60 days. For the scope of this webinar, we would be focusing on the conceptualization, building, testing, and submission phases of the life cycle. Ideation and distribution would not be considered, as these are phases of the life cycle which usually happen a long time before the actual conceptualization takes place, and distribution mainly falls into the marketing aspect of the application. So we would start off with the conceptualization phase. Conceptualization is defined as converting your ideas into tangible forms. You would see that as I progress, on the left top corner of the slide, you're seeing a small pie chart. The pie chart indicates the entire time it takes to build an application. And the piece that has been pulled out of the pie, which is 10%, is the time that is required for the conceptualization phase. Now we would start off with tips one after another. These tips have been numbered so that towards the end you would get a set of 12 tips. So I would like you to follow them one after another. So tip number one falls under conceptualization, which says that you need to rapidly build application using mockups and workflows. Tools like Balsamiq, Mockflow, OmniGraffle, and Sketch would allow you to build mockup screens, connect them, and give you a sense of workflow of how the control would move from one screen to another, thus capturing each and every use case of your application. OmniGraffle works more in the form of Microsoft Visio, where it gives you a sense of multi-directional flows. The next step is to plan out how the data would be exchanged between different layers. So under that, you first need to identify what roles would your server be playing and what role would the mobile app be doing. It is very important that the distribution of roles happens at this stage, because later on it would lead to a lot of redundancy. Once you have identified what's the roles of each of these components, you need to figure out how data would be exchanged between them. Web services is the most preferred one, but again, RESTful versus SOAP is another dilemma that you would be faced with. The preferred option is REST, as it has its own advantages in the mobile space. REST and SOAP are mainly used for application-initiated communication. If your server wants to communicate with different mobile handsets, then it should use the push mechanism, commonly known as push notification, so that it can send out notifications and messages to different devices. A common mistake done by developers is that they implement a polling mechanism in the mobile device or in the mobile application so that it continuously tries to ping the server and check if there are any updates coming from there. This can greatly hamper the performance of the application. So always go for push mechanisms. Tip number 3 under conceptualization is to build the app in a layered approach vis-a-vis a monolithic approach, which is probably going to make the application into a solid block, making it extremely difficult to maintain. So under the layered approach, you need to identify what kind of a user interface you would be building. What controls would it use? Are you going for native, third-party controls, or something as simple as HTML5? On the business logic part, you need to identify what would be the classes or the entities that would play a role in your system, and what kind of controllers would you be requiring for them to interact with the different layers. The data access layer is another critical piece. Once you have the classes and controllers in place, you need to have a solid network service so that your application can talk with the databases or with the native controls. Now, being prepared with this layered approach would greatly help during the building phase. At the bottom of the slide, you would see a block which we call as the key takeaway from this particular slide. So if you follow all these 3 tips mentioned under conceptualization, it will give you a clarity on how the app would work in a very early stage, and it will also help you understand issues and bottlenecks so that you can work them around while you're still at the concept level and save valuable time of rework during the building phase. So now let's move on to the next phase of application development. We call this as building, and it means converting your tangible artifacts from the conceptualization phase into executable form. The pie chart on the left top indicates that after spending 10% of your time on conceptualization, you need to spend close to 50% of your time building the application. Since this is the central piece, it is good if you dedicate enough time towards it. So tip number 4 falls under building. It says that one should not hesitate to use design patterns. Generally, developers might shy away from design patterns just because they have a feeling that they might slow down things, or they just don't have the understanding for it. But surely that is not the case. Design patterns like MVC and template save a lot of efforts on duplication. They avoid duplication so that you don't need to reinvest your time building the same features again. If you closely look at a mobile application, it is nothing but a collection of similar looking screens. So that is where the template pattern comes in very handy. On same lines, the factory method provides much better decoupling. With this, conversion of data or conversion of information which takes place between different entities becomes very easy. Tip number 5 under building is to think smarter while you're coding. So it not necessarily means that you have to think smart when you are actually typing in the code, but it also tells that how smart you need to be when it comes on how you want to use the code. So for instance, if you are planning to build a mobile application which is intended for different platforms like iOS, Android, or Windows Phone, then you should make use of some of the common libraries like PhoneGap, RowMobile, Corona 2D, or Unity 3D. All these libraries or frameworks work on a common principle of code once and use on multiple platforms. This is going to save a lot of time and effort in reduplicating the same information for different platforms. If your company is building applications which belong to a same family, then you should implement common libraries so that all those applications can use these common libraries. For instance, if you are building applications which are going to authenticate the user based on, say, your Active Directory, then the login module can become a part of the common library so that you don't need to rewrite this feature again and again for all your mobile applications. Tip number 6 under building is you should not compromise on code quality. It is very important that the quality of the code should be very good. It's quite likely that your application might have better quality, but if the code which is sitting behind it, if it is not of a good quality, then it's going to be extremely painstaking and time-consuming when it comes to building patches or when it comes to merely maintaining the code. So one should use different tools like Static Analyzer, which is meant for Xcode, Jupyter, which integrates into Eclipse. Both of these give a good snapshot of how the application is using different resources. At the same time, Agile Review and Crucible are code analyzers, and they kind of review the code and give the points where the developer has gone wrong on either the logical front, on syntactical front, or even in the method which is used for commenting. Tip number 7 under building is to become ready for testing. Developers should use unit test frameworks like ZenTesting Kit and JUnit. What these indicate is that as the developer is writing in code, these frameworks would ensure that they would also create unit test cases for the pieces of code that they are implementing. An application which has a strong unit testing side tend to have less number of bugs. At the same time, you should also implement something called as one-click build automation. This can be done using JMeter and Jenkins. What one-click means is that it is a one-click process to build the application, to package the application, to deploy the application, and then finally to unit test the application and then submit a result. If this thing is automated, it can save a ton of time. So the key takeaway from these 4 tips is that if you automate tasks using some of these tools, they would make the code more maintainable, they would detect bugs with minimum number of cycles, and you know that if both these things happen, it is going to save a considerable amount of time. So let's move on to the third phase of building your application, testing. What this ensures is that your app is usable, it has superior user experience, and at the same time it is secure. Again, your friendly pie chart on the left shows that you need to invest 25% of your time in testing the application. So tip number 8 under testing is to automate. One can automate the user interface testing using tools like Instruments and PhoneMonkey. Both these tools, they try to generate scripts or they try to record scripts as the QA moves through different scenarios, and then these automated scripts can be reused on each and every build that is being sent out. At the same time, data validation testing can also be automated using test lodge and test rate. This is especially useful when you have a lot of data coming in from a server and you need to ensure that your application is able to render all the data that's coming in. On-field crash reporting service is something which is very important to implement on your application. What this means is that your application carries certain piece of code which, in case if the application crashes, would send out a report back to your server, and then you can have all the triage information and all the necessary details so that you can identify the problem and try to fix it. JMC, which is a part of Jira, would allow you to convert such on-field crash reports into Jira items so that your developers know on the spot how the application is behaving and what are the outstanding issues. Tip number 9 under testing is test rapidly and be aggressive at the same time. You would agree that automation would take care of the functional testing part so that you can now focus on testing of different combinations such as network types like 2G, 3G, and even 4G, different form factors like phones with different resolutions and different tablet devices, and at the same time so make your app work properly under different resource usage scenarios. So something similar to how would your app behave in case your device is running low on memory. So all these kind of ad hoc testing needs to be done so that your application becomes of a great quality. Tip number 9 under testing is obviously not forgetting about security. Traditionally, iOS applications are considered to be very safe. The mere design of the application and of the operating system makes it almost entirely hack-proof, but at the same time, some amount of testing efforts need to be done on that part. The tools like Package Play, Manifest Explorer, Intent Sniffer, and Intent Fuzzer are made to work with Android because considering the nature of the operating systems, which is in the form of open source, and the type of application and the scrutiny that happens at Google's end, these tools have become more famous for the Android platform. Things like Package Play and Manifest Explorer open your application in a sandbox model and tell you what are the different ways in which it could be hacked. Intent Sniffer and Intent Fuzzer keep a track of the interactions that happen between different modules of your application and try to look out for security breaches. So the key takeaway from the testing phase would be that these testing techniques ensure superior quality in a very short span of time, thus reducing a lot of bugs and at the same time reduce the requirement for bug patches once the application is released. So let's make our way to the last phase of the life cycle, which is submission. What it means is that now since you have your application built, it has been tested thoroughly, and you have a great app. But now you need to send it to the publishers so that they can circulate it to the users. Publishers over here are the App Store owners like Apple, Google, and Microsoft. The pie chart on the left top corner says that it takes close to 15% of your time to publish an app on the store. Now this 15%, it comprises of the time it takes to submit the app and for the publisher review team to complete the review process. So tip number 11 falls under the submission phase. It is probably by far the most crucial tip of all, and it all depends on how well you have followed the previous 12 tips, the previous 10 tips. So what it says is that you need to ensure that your application does not have the following things in it. It should not have compilation warnings. Usually, developers submit applications which are error-free, but they have warnings. But mind you, that this is one of the most famous reasons why applications get rejected. At the same time, you should not attempt to duplicate native features by using your own. Users should be notified correctly. The publishers are extremely harsh towards incorrect user notifications, and the app is almost immediately rejected. If your app is using memory beyond its intended usage, then there is a high likelihood that the OS itself would kill the application each time. Too many redirection to web pages should be avoided. And any improper application description in the submission phase also may lead to a rejection. Now these are the top 6 items or top 6 reasons why applications get rejected, and there are many more. So you also need to look out for the common rejection reasons. So finally we come to the last and the 12th tip, which also falls under the submission phase. Now we need to, under this tip, the user or the developer needs to carefully understand the review process. First of all, we need to understand how to honor the human interface guidelines published by each of these store owners. The human interface guidelines usually captures how the application is using the display of the device, how is it responding to the gestures the user is inputting, how does it behave to orientation changes, does it have a consistent look and feel to the guidelines that have been set forth, what is the aesthetic integrity, and what kind of a feedback does it give back to the user in case of an error scenario or in case of general information. One also needs to carefully complete the submission documentation. Although this is not a very complex process, but there are some tedious questions which need to be answered cleverly. Finally, if your application is submitted, the reviewer might ask for more information. So assuming that you have your artifacts ready from the conceptualization phase, you should be able to provide these very quickly to the reviewer. So the key takeaway from these last 2 tips is that if you are prepared, then it's going to significantly improve your chances of a one-shot approval on these stores. So now we can relate all these 12 tips together and try to associate it with the product life cycle that we had seen before. Now if you look at it in a way, then these 12 tips can help you achieve nearly a 30% reduction in your development time and cost. Now this is a huge number. And if you imagine, if you relate it back to the slide from mobile car stats, then it said that a simple application takes nearly $4,000 to $10,000 to build. With a 30% reduction, the same application can be built with probably higher quality in just maybe $2,800 or maybe $7,000. Now, if you kind of extrapolate and put these figures for more complex application, the savings are going to be enormous.
So, Subodh, you've just not given some 12 tips, but what you have also done is you have kind of given them a cost savings, something that is quantifiable for them. And I guess that is the core crux of the 12 tips, that not only can you reduce your time, but the cost, especially considering the economy, considering the couple of startups and even the enterprise ISVs, this is a huge saving that is going to come across to them. So in that sense, this is really great. And to my audience, I hope you have noted down all the 12 tips. But if not, do remember that we would be sending this across, this presentation as well as the audio script. So that brings us to the end of our prepared information for you. Thank you for being such a great audience. We are now open to the question and answer session. And for that, we would like you to poll in your questions in the question box. And in the meantime that you note down your questions and we assess them over here, I'm going to leave you with 2 slides which talk about our Harbinger mobile practice and the Harbinger group. This is just for you a read-only kind of a move. Okay, I have a question in terms of where can I find a list of Harbinger apps. So before I can pass it on to Subodh, maybe what I could let you know is that you can visit us on our website, harbinger-systems.com, to know more about our mobile app development services. We have also listed sample mobile app case studies on our website, so feel free to download. And yes, indeed, you can visit or you can search for Harbinger Systems on the Apple Store, Google Store, and Windows Store. So please feel to visit us over there. And remember that we'll be creating a document with all your questions and the answers, and we are going to make it available to everyone. So if you don't get to your question, or if you'd rather have your questions emailed to us, feel free to do it. But do keep in mind that the answers will be coming. Okay, Subodh, you did mention something about seasonal apps. So could you just kind of elaborate more on these seasonal apps, or if it's possible, a couple of examples?
Surely. So a seasonal app, it's something similar, or it's based to an event that is going to happen. So for instance, if Halloween is an event, then there are a lot of applications that usually pop out at that time. Or if holiday season is coming up, then majority of the stores, may it be superstores or may it be the smallest of all stores, if they want to reach out to more and more customers, then they can come up with their own applications. If a car company is going to launch a new car, then just as a teaser, they would release applications which would talk about the car and at the same time give more information about probably the nearest places to visit, or maybe more information about the car, or even videos. So these are examples of seasonal apps where the application is probably less stickier as compared to complex apps like CRM, and a user would probably just use it for 2 or 3 months and then just forget about it.
Okay, that sounds good. There's a request if you could, bring the building slide back on. Okay, the question on this slide is, could you elaborate or could you give us examples of common library? Johnson, do you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. In common library, we could specifically have, as Subodh mentioned, a module like a logging part into the common library and use it across your applications. There could be other libraries as well. So for instance, if you are always using RESTful APIs, you can use a common network library that can communicate across to your server, and you can use this across your multiple mobile applications as well. So these are two examples for it.
Okay, great. Hang on a minute. I think there's something more relevant. We have been asked to bring across is the testing slide. And the question is, does Harbinger have a compatibility test metric for devices?
Yes. So we actually have a test matrix which comprises from different device types like iPad, iPhone, different screen resolutions, because Android has many resolutions, so, and even handset types and manufacturers. So we have a matrix ready, and how and what aspects we should be testing on it. So we have that ready as well.
Okay. Subodh, since I guess this question would be more apt for you, since you have you lead a project management team, what's been the Harbinger experience when it comes to app submissions?
Okay, so app submissions, it is a totally different ball game as compared to building the application. Since the publisher is an external entity that plays a role in this process, a lot depends on how quickly the publishers respond. So usually Google app submissions take place, or usually they take anything between 24 to 48 hours to approve the app, whereas Apple Store, it's more of a manual and a people-driven process. So our best experience with Apple Store has been that apps got approved in a span of maybe 20 hours. And during Christmas season, the reviewers from Apple, they usually go on vacation. And as a result, the applications might take maybe nearly 2 weeks to get reviewed. So it's a varied experience, to be frank.
So if I had to put it very lightly, it's just not that you have seasonal apps, but I guess even your submission could be seasonally affected, is it?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's great. And it seems there's some kind of correlation. Is submission and distribution the same, or are they different?
Usually, developers tend to mix both of them. So submission is the process in which you take your application and ask them to be reviewed by the publisher, whereas distribution takes place after submission, wherein you put in links to the store, or you submit, or you give your application to your users either over internet or through the stores. So these are two different entities, and one should not confuse between two of them.
Great. It seems Android is picking up as a kind of an interest level for an OS. The question that I'm getting is, anything as a tips, or if you could narrate any of your experience around Android customization. So anyone could answer.
Okay.
So Johnson, the whole thing is, what is your experience around Android customization?
Yes. So Android has specified a very good, it's already open source and it's easy to customize. And as Subodh had mentioned, that there are few vulnerabilities around security. So we can actually go into the code, make those changes, have some security aspects added into it, and then publish it out. So it's a very good area, and many of them are actually started up having their custom Android OS published, and it's been growing, and probably that's one reason why Android is gaining up market as well.
So yes, I am getting this question as a kind of, it seems everyone is asking this. would this presentation and the audio script would be shared? Yes, indeed, it's going to be shared. We will be sending across an email with a link to download the presentation slide as well as the audio script. And I do understand that this being in the middle of your working day, you know, that the 12 tips you have been downloaded, noted by you, you know, you would be kind of wanting to digest it and kind of evaluate and then have some questions for us. So yes, even after the webinar, you are open, or feel free to send in your emails with questions to either my email, or you could go to hsplinfo@harbingersystems.com and we can take your questions out over there also. So I guess that should be it. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of our webinar. We appreciate your participation, feedback, and great questions. It's been mine, Subodh's, and Johnson's pleasure to take you all through the best practices of rapid mobile app development, and not to forget the dollar savings that you're going to take back home today. So on behalf of the entire Harbinger Systems team, we thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.